Hello everyone, and thank you to DDL for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'm Charlotte Harris from Team Consulting, and today I'd like to share with you some of our experiences in helping our clients select the right inhalation device technology to deliver some of their therapies. So my role is Head of Front-End Innovation. That means I'm focused on setting the right direction in the early stages of the product development cycle. And I work for Team Consulting, a medical device design and development consultancy based in Cambridge in the UK. Today I'd like to talk to you about two things. First, I want to talk about the importance of having the right inhalation device, and then I'm going to walk you through 4 steps to help you select that right inhalation device for your therapy. So when we're developing a new therapy, the device you develop or select to deliver it will be key to the overall product success. The development effort required for a device is really, though, tiny in comparison to the huge cost and timescales of a drug development. But that device has to be the right device for your requirements and your application. Because if it's wrong and perhaps it doesn't perform technically or people can't use it, then the chances of that drug successfully entering the patient's body through that device are severely compromised. So we shouldn't underestimate the importance of the device. When we talk about the right inhalation device, what's right for one company in therapy might be different to what's right for another, and we need to look at each case individually. For one company, the right product might be the one that gets to clinic or market fastest. For another, it could be the one that provides the optimal user experience. And for another, it might be the one with superior technical performance. And what we're really aiming for is that pink sweet spot in the middle there, which is the perfect blend of all 3 of those things. But this is not easy to achieve, especially when we've got different people in the team with different objectives, and the project can easily be pulled off in one direction or another. So when we're looking for a device, we've got 2 options really to obtain it. That is to either develop your own new device from scratch, or to license an existing or developing technology from someone else. And there may be many good reasons why you wish to develop your own device from scratch, but if there's something available either on or near the market that you could license, then many pharma companies decide to choose this route because it's potentially less risky, could take less time, cost less money than a ground up development. So this is the route I'm going to be focusing on today. But once you've decided on your route, how do you know which of the device technologies available will be the right one for you? And this is where it helps to have an idea what to do. So now I'm going to walk you through 4 initial steps, which are align, define, explore and assess, that a pharma company might take to identify some promising candidates for delivery of their new inhaled therapy. Now, a further more extensive process of assessment and due diligence will need to follow this, but these 4 initial steps will help identify a short list of suitable technologies for your specific application and help set you on the path to selecting the right device. And the first of these steps is to align your stakeholders at the start. We believe it's really important to gain consensus and alignment on project goals right from the word go, because we need to prevent surprises and disagreements later on. We found the best way to do this is to have a strategic workshop early on in the project. And this workshop should be attended by a mix of key stakeholders from across the business, for example, regulatory, commercial, formulation, clinical, devices, etc. And this workshop is a forum for all those people to share their own views, but for the group to develop a shared view, and it's an opportunity to get those busy people together and work as a team. Now, it's likely that a lot of those people that we need at that workshop will be located all around the globe, and we found you can't beat meeting face to face if it's possible. But with today's coronavirus challenges, this is really difficult. However, our experiences both in the past and over the last 8 or 9 months or so have shown that a remote workshop using video conferencing and some of the available online collaborative tools can do the job just as well. So at this workshop, we want to firstly agree the goals and objectives for the project, the therapy and the device. And together we want to develop a shared vision for what we're trying to achieve. We need to make sure we share knowledge between the different skill sets and understand the aspirations and constraints from each viewpoint, as well as identifying gaps in the group's knowledge and making a plan for research to fill them. And there is one final objective of getting that diverse group together, and we'll cover that in step 2 shortly. So by the end of this first step, we've allowed a diverse mix of stakeholders to share their knowledge and views, and between them they've agreed objectives and a shared vision. And we've identified where there are gaps in the group's knowledge and where more research needs to be done. So everyone is aligned on what happens next. And the second step is to define your requirements for your ideal device. So let's go back to our Venn diagram I showed you a few minutes ago. And remember, we're aiming for that balanced sweet spot in the pink there in the middle. So we should define our device requirements with our diverse stakeholder group from before. And some example requirements might be, from a technical angle, we're looking for a device to deliver drug payload of X in a time of Y. Or from a commercial perspective, we need to target a market launch of no later than 20XX. Or from a user's perspective, we need a device that's suitable for use by patients with conditions X and Y. And together as a group, we're going to have to discuss, argue over and capture these requirements. So it could be helpful to use an independent facilitator to do this. And then this is where it starts to get a little bit complicated. Once we've captured our list of requirements, it's really helpful to understand from our stakeholders which ones are the priorities, which ones are those that are essential we address with the device, and which are just more nice to haves. And it's really helpful to do this exercise in our workshop, so we can ask our participants to individually rank which are the most important requirements from their perspective. Because then we can collate and consolidate the results from the group and discuss and see if we all agree. To take things a step further after the workshop, we can define criteria against which we'll score the device technologies that we later find. And we can do this in a number of ways, but one way shown here is to assign a weighting value to each requirement to define its importance. And then we can define scoring scores such as 5, 3 and 1, and scoring criteria to assess our technologies. And this can be quite a detailed process, and we don't necessarily need to do it in all cases, but it will help to ensure that our technologies are assessed fairly and equally when we come to do it. So by the end of our second step, we've gathered technical, commercial and user requirements for a diverse mix of stakeholders, and we've prioritised those requirements. And then finally, we've defined how we're going to assess our device technologies against these requirements when we find them. So our third step is simple. Now it's time for us to explore the options for our delivery device. When we're looking at the technology landscape, we should make sure that we look at marketed devices as well as devices that are still in development. Places where we could find about technologies could include consulting with device experts. We could attend conferences such as DDL, as we are all here today. We could be looking at articles in papers and publications in journals. We could look at company websites and have some early conversations with suppliers. And as we collect this information, we found that creating a database where we have relevant headings to ensure we collect all the same information about each device technology is really helpful. And we do this for our long list of technologies that we find. And in addition to the spreadsheet, we found creating a pro forma template really useful. And we populate this template with the same information that we find about each device technology, but it just makes it easier to summarize the raw data we've collected and easily compare the technologies against each other at a glance without having to look through a detailed spreadsheet. So by the end of this third step, we've explored the landscape of possible device technologies and used a variety of sources. We've captured relevant information about each device and presented that information in a clear way which allows us to compare the technologies against each other. Which brings us to our fourth and final step, which is to assess the technologies we've identified against the requirements in step 2. So if we now go back to our scoring and selection matrix I showed you earlier, I've now added the additional score columns on the right here, where the technologies, called A and B in this case, have been assessed against the scoring criteria and given a weighted score. Now we can add up all these weighted scores to get an overall score for each device technology, and we can compare these scores as they are, or we may prefer to map them out in a more visual manner, as this allows us to quickly compare the devices and identify which ones best meet our requirements and should be on our shortlist. So I've got a couple of examples here, a bar plot on the left and a scatter plot on the right, and we can see at a glance which ones should go onto our shortlist. But now we have this shortlist, this process often highlights that there's rarely a solution that's ready to go off the shelf and exactly meets all of your requirements. So it's likely that there'll need to be trade-offs to discuss and some modifications to the design that's needed. So it's important that we try and assess the impact of these early on in the process before we go too far. So by the end of this fourth and final step, we'll have systematically scored and assessed each of the device technologies in a fair and equal manner, and we'll have mapped the results and compared the scores. And from this, we've identified a short list of devices that we want to do some further assessment on. And finally, we've had an assessment of the trade-offs and the impact of any modifications that we might need. But it doesn't end there. Those 4 steps I've outlined today will take us through the early part of the process and have identified a shortlist. But following this, it's really likely that we'll probably need to do some user research to ensure that these devices meet the needs of our users. There might be some design modifications that we need to do, so we'll need to do some development and testing. And there'll be some further due diligence required around the capabilities of the supplier, not to mention the time that we need to agree the terms of any deals. But if you remember the 4 steps I've mentioned today of align, define, explore and assess, and that it helps to have an idea what you're doing in the early stages of device selection, then you'll be well on your way to selecting the right device for your new therapy. Thank you very much.